And now we are turning the perspective a little bit. We began the discussion here, but now we are looking into how audience is reacting to synthetic voices. I don't know if we are going to visit our favorite place, the Uncanny Valley, but I guess we will at some point. Please welcome Lene Heiselberg from Center for Journalism at University of Southern Denmark. Please.
Yes, my name is Lene Heiselberg, and I'm from the University of Southern Denmark. I'm employed at the Center for Journalism and affiliated with the Digital Democracy Center. I was formerly employed at the Danish Broadcasting Corporation for very many years, and there I was taught that the audience perspective is really, really important. So today I'm all about doing audience research. Today, the title of my talk is Listener Attitudes to News Reading by a Neural Speech Synthesizer. And neural speech synthesizer is just another word for the technology that Lena talked about, the TTS. So what we were thinking in my research group was that, well, we already see that news organizations have begun to explore these possibilities for applying TTS in the newsroom. And they're already using it as a supplement to regular human news reading. And then we thought, the audience reaction to this innovation must be the thing that determines the implementation in the newsroom, right? So it's not just technology determining the use, it's also the audience perspective. And that's why the focus of my talk today is, how is the news audience reacting to this use of technology? First of all, I want you to meet Christel. Christel is Christel is developed by Microsoft in the Azure package, and Christel is one of the first TTS technologies that actually speaks Danish. So that's the one that we've used. I'll try to turn this on. I think I need
15 år efter han sidst var i ringen og bokse professionelt, beviste Mike Tyson i nat, at han stadigvæk godt kan bruge hænderne til at slås med. Det skete, da han mødte den 3 år yngre Roy Jones Jr. i en opvisningskamp. Kampen, der blev bokset over 8 omgange, endte ifølge dommerne uafgjort. Men kommentatorer på forskellige udenlandske medier er enige om, at Tyson dominerede gennem hele kampen, og der også havde fortjent at vinde. Reaktionen fra Tyson vidner om, at den ellers så temperamentsfulde bokser er blevet mildere med alderen. Jeg er okay med afgørelsen, sagde Tyson efter at resultatet var bekendtgjort.
Yes. So, this was in Danish, but I think most of you understood that it is about a boxing match with Mike Tyson. The study design behind this research project used 12 semi-structured qualitative interviews. So we went into depth talking to each of the respondents participating in this study. The sample was Danish radio listeners, and they were from different regions, they were from different educational backgrounds, and of course, they were from different generations, because we did not only want the younger audiences to talk to. One very important sample criterion was that they must listen to radio news daily, so they were very familiar with flow radio news when we exposed them to this voice by Christel. As preparation for the study, we asked them to listen to news read by Christel, but they did not know. So none of these 12 respondents knew what they were listening to. And what they were listening to was a stimulus material. It was a 4-minute news program from DR that we were allowed to reuse, and it was just a regular news program that are very common from a very boring point in time, so there was nothing unusual going on. Results. Here I want to say that the only thing that I could bring today was the results that focused on credibility. And credibility was actually one of the most exciting things in the study. But the first I want to show you is that awareness surprised us. Because of these 12 respondents, there was a group that definitely was aware that this was a synthetic voice. They realized or suspected that the news was read by TTS. But there was also another group, and they were unaware. They did not notice that the news was read by TTS at all. And that, of course, makes the appreciation differ. We had the group of the aware participants. Some were very annoyed with the voice. They thought it sounded like their GPS, or like a robot, or like some old computer reading the news. They were really annoyed, but there were also some participants in that group that didn't care at all, and some were actually positive towards the voice. And we see the exact same thing in the group of unaware participants who thinks that this is a human newsreader. We see the same patterns, right? We see some are annoyed with the voice, as they would be with a human newsreader, and that some were positive. Yes. And then to all of these factors that affect credibility, we have a lot of different factors in here, and I cannot go through them today because I only have 15 minutes. But there are things about the message that is very important when it comes to credibility. There are things about the source that's very important. And there's also factors related to context that's very important. But there are two things that I've chosen to go into depth with today, and that's what we call lack of emotionality that causes increased objectivity, and also the anthropomorphism that is going on when you listen to the TTS. So that's exciting, in my opinion, at least. What happens when there's a lack of emotion in a TTS voice? A lot of different things happens, actually. The first one is that our listeners say that this can actually be advantageous because the TTS cannot consciously or subconsciously influence the listener by expressing feelings. And some of the respondents say that this is a huge advantage in a time where we have misinformation and disinformation and fake news. This actually gives them some comfort that they can believe what they are listening to and they are not being deceived in any way. So that came as a surprise to me. But of course, the viewers also point to disadvantages. Because as they say, the voice cannot convey appropriate emotions. And then they say that that's really an issue when it comes to sports, when it comes to deaths, and when it comes to the weather reports. And do you know what? Sports and the weather is some of the genres that we use the most automatization around, right? We say, okay, that can be read or wrote by a robot. But when you ask the listeners, they do not agree because they want to know, they want to feel the enthusiasm in the voice when their team won. And as one of the respondents said, if our Queen Margrethe dies, it cannot be a robot reading the news because I want appropriate emotions when I hear that message. It's so important in history, I want the emotions. And when it comes to the weather, they say, and these, remember, this is Danes, and we really like sun because we don't have very much of it. So they want happy emotions in the voice when we have sunny weather. Yeah, and they want kind of to feel some sorrow in the voice when we have rainy weather for the 12th day in a row. Yeah, and we can all relate to that, right? Yeah. So that's important. Lack of emotions influences credibility. The other point that I wanted to address is that our listeners tend to humanize the TTS, and that really caught me by surprise. Anthropomorphism is a big thing. They attribute human characteristics to the technology. They create personas in their mind. They know that TTS is merely tech, but that doesn't mean that they do not form perceptions and opinions about the technology. They treat it as a human in their mind, and we had a lot of great examples of that. So, credibility. The imagined persona definitely influences the credibility of your media companies. So we need to be aware of that when we use this kind of technology. I have two examples, two great quotes that I brought. And this is kind of explaining to you what's happening in the mind of the users when they listen to Christel reading DR News. Lady, 55 years old, she says, well, I imagine a little blonde lady of 40 to 45 years. And a 29-year-old male, he says, this is a 29-year-old woman with shoulder-long blonde hair. I always feel like they resemble the same slightly annoying Copenhagen types who want something more than what they are doing right now. So this is the annoying, ambitious Copenhagen types, right? We all know those. Yeah. So these are examples of what's going on in the mind of the listener when they listen to TTS news readings. we actually saw 4 different patterns, and that happens because of this anthropomorphism. The first one is that we see that the listeners, they attribute both physical and mental personality traits to the voice. You just saw that in the quotes. The second pattern is that they associate the TTS voice with well-known celebrities or personalities that they know from the media. In Denmark, more than one referred to Karin Kruse, just a blonde version of Karin Kruse from TV2. Pattern number 3, they categorize the speaker as a member of a group defined by stereotypical attributes, and you saw that with these over-ambitious, annoying Copenhagen types. And the fourth one is that they tend to fabricate personal background narratives about these voices. Where do they come from? One of them said that, well, this young 29-year-old lady, she definitely moved from Jutland to Copenhagen right after she finished her education, and she got a job, and now she can't master it, right? All those narratives going on in the mind of the listeners. So I want to end off with 5 pieces of advice from the viewers, no, not viewers, of course, from the listeners to you guys. And the first one is that they ask you to communicate extensively and transparently about the use of TTS voices. Every time, every day. I'm sorry, Lena. Advice number 2, please consider for which news genres and situations that TTS is appropriate. We tend to believe that sports, the weather, and financial reports which should be okay, but just remember that there's some emotionality to it. Number 3, the lack of emotionality in TTS news readings influences credibility both positively and negatively. As I told you about, it both has disadvantages and advantages. Number 4, give the choice of a TTS voice as much consideration as a human news reader. This is really important because, number 5, the TTS voice will, as any other human host, affect the news media brand behind it. There's this very, very evident rub-off to the media brand also from a TTS technology voice. Thank you so much for your attention. If you want to chat or if you want to read the paper behind this presentation, just send me an email and I'll be happy to chat or to send you an email. Thanks a lot.
Isn't it, you need to give it a thought, right, that now you have audience hallucinating.
Yeah.
Because they are making up stuff.
They're making up stuff.
About the robot.
Yeah.
And that's what we do, right? Now, you said what they preferred, but as everybody in this room knows, then you don't always know what you really prefer. That's the game of the horses instead of the car, right?
Yes, yes.
So did you do any research where you try to get beyond that obstacle?
Yeah. I guess you know that we have a lab. Yeah. We do have a lab at STU, a small lab where we, instead of asking questions, measure how people react to media products. So we measure their emotional, we measure their arousal levels. And it's really, really interesting to see how they react to different types of media content when we don't ask them, but measure instead. So we just finished a wonderful project with DR, TV2, and TV2 Funen in the context of the DDC, where we measure a flow version of a news clip compared to a streaming-optimized version of a news clip, just to see which one performs best in terms of kicking up and the arousal kicking up and down.
Spill it. Come. Can we have
next year in this conference?
Okay. Nick?
So, thanks for your talk. Given that we're going to have news organizations that are training different voices to meet different audience interests and needs and segments and so on, what would you say to the idea of a news organization trying to optimize credibility by matching or personalizing the voice that's used to read the news to different, let's say, audience segments?
Yeah. Well, I'm all for it. I think it's a good idea as long as you keep testing your voices on humans and not just on fellow journalists. Keep asking the viewer, no, I keep saying the viewers, the listeners, of course. Yeah, I also work with viewers. Ask the listeners what they feel about it and keep doing that. Don't just do it once while you're prototyping. Also do it as an evaluation tool so that you keep on track in terms of the development of the viewers. Because listeners, as we heard earlier on today, their habits tend to develop very fast. So we need to keep track of that to keep them happy.
Hello? But is it appropriate for a news organization to manipulate the credibility of their brand using the voice that's chosen to read the news to an individual?
I know it's a hard question, and I also know why you're asking it, Nick, and you're putting me on the spot here, but I think, I'm very much in line with Lena, and you should probably be up here answering these questions along with me, but I think we need to move along because there are a lot of people that can benefit from this, but we need to do it in an ethical manner, and we need to do it with our audience in mind and keep asking them how they think things are going. And as long as we do that, have our ethical compass as an institution, and also ask the listeners, then I think we should be fine. That's my opinion, at least. It can be debated.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, working at Berlingske Media as product manager. How did you ensure when you recruited these 12 people that they were actually the target group for TTS articles?
Yes, we had a professional recruiting company doing that for us, exactly for the reason that you were asking about. You need professional recruitment to typecast these people. So I agree, yeah. It was Wilke. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. We are going to have some lunch now, and we'll begin again 1:30. Thank you, Lena.